Hey, what's up, Street Talks? It's Eric from the Eric Street Photography blog. So, want to do a fun little video with you talking about an idea I had while at the sauna at the gym. The idea is life is about choices, not obligations. So, I think this is an essential thing to think about just life and philosophy is that when people say, think about your duties, your obligations, be responsible, blah, blah. What they're really trying to do is control you by superimposing their personal morals, ethics, and values onto you and using tools of guilt, shame, notions of duty, responsibility as a weapon to control you. And now, I think this is not a good thing because what actually ends up happening in life is when you do things to please other people and you think you're doing it out of self-sacrifice, you think you're doing a good thing, it's really bad because in the long term, you're going to end up resenting that person no matter who that person is. So for example, like even with me and Cindy, my number one cardinal rule is to not breed any sort of resentment towards Cindy. And I think actually if you study why couples generally tend to divorce, the number one reason is hidden feelings of resentment. And resentment is kind of like, I heard the best definition of resentment is drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. It's obviously makes no sense, right? But I think that's what we tend to doing. And honestly, it's kind of not really our fault in the sense that, if you grew up in the West or in America or, with some sort of like Christian Judeo values, or even if you grew up like atheist or agnostic, if you grew up in America or you have generally Western values, notions of duty, obligations, responsibility are like supreme virtues in our modern society. And they all stem from Judeo-Christian morality of like, the only good action for you to do is self-sacrifice. Anything you do for yourself is evil, essentially. So we're all trying to strive to be, good people because you either want to be good for the sake of being good or you want to go to heaven, whatever it may be. And then what we end up doing is we compromise what's best for us and in order to help other people and to empower other people and self-sacrifice ourselves for others. And now this is a big problem because ultimately everyone loses. If I compromise my personal values to make someone else happy, then I feel kind of resentful and shitty towards it. And the other person over the long term might feel you secretly, either secretly or objectively resenting you as well. And that's actually the worst thing is when somebody helps you out of a sense of resentment or like sort of like kind of like petty. And I think what usually manifests as like pettiness or like, quote, quote, passive aggressive behavior. This happens a lot from parents toward their kids. They're like, oh, don't you know how much I sacrificed to give you a better life? And then they just try to make you feel super guilty instead of like just saying, I love you and do this because it would I think families and people just need to communicate better by just being more honest. And with our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts, whatever, to not put a moral judgment on however you feel or you think, because then our communication becomes inauthentic. And I don't really think that there's any ultimately good or bad or good or evil morals or ethics. It just comes down to authentic or inauthentic. So essentially, you don't want to fake. And if you think about life as about choices and options, life actually becomes a trillion times better. If you think about life as an obligation towards, like the planet, your community, your family, God, religion, whatever, then you'll never really live, in my opinion, the happiest life possible. And I think when it comes to choices and options in life, I think that's very essential is for us to think about consequences. Now, what are consequences? Consequences are taking the responsibility of your actions. And so technically in life, you're able to make any sort of choices you want. You have unlimited options and unlimited, choices and obligations to make. But whatever option or choice or decision you make, you must be willing to take the consequences. So for example, you technically have the power to kill somebody. I mean, obviously, like I don't condone that behavior, but you could go out and, you know, whack somebody, right? Now you could do that, but you have to deal with the consequences that you'll most likely go to jail for the rest of your life, or you might get the death penalty. Or even if you decide to be kind of like a shitty parent or a father, what ends up happening is as you get older, you know, your children will feel resentment towards you and ignore you or cut you out of their lives. Is essentially what happened to my dad. So essentially everyone needs to toughen up, and they need to be able to take responsibility for their own actions. And so in life, never do anything what is going to cause you resentment in the long run, because I think feelings of malice, feelings of resentment, these are like the worst feelings that could fester within you. And even if you're like a good self-sacrificial person, it's going to tear away even at the kindest hearted souls, in my opinion. I think for me, my general nature is I always put others before myself, and that's, you know, what our buddy Jesus, or I think this is just like generally what the church recommends. And I think it's, I mean, obviously the notion of helping other people, I think it's a good one, but the notion of putting others above you, I think actually is not a good idea, because okay, so it kind of makes no sense from a practical perspective, is that if, like, let's say you have a neighbor, Joe, and here you are. If you put Joe above you, right? Shouldn't Joe also put you above himself? Even if you're in a relationship, right? Like me and Cindy. If I put Cindy above myself, shouldn't Cindy put me above her? So this kind of logic kind of really doesn't make sense. I think it's good to be self-sacrificial at times to help the other person because you love them, because it's you know, the only, I think this is a quote I like from Nassim Taleb. He said this in The Bed of Procrustes, is love without sacrifice is theft, which means true love involves some sort of sacrifice. That's the only way you can have skin in the game to really show you love somebody, generally through actions, which is a good way, because I think also that's the only, I mean, I think that's the only real way to show somebody you really love and care for them is through your actions, right? And there needs to be some sort of sacrifice or some sort of personal downside to you, or else I don't think you really quote love that person. I think it's also a good way to judge who your real friends are and not. So, let's see, to backtrack. Don't put others above yourself. I think this is just kind of a nonsensical idea. I think a better idea is seek to empower yourself to the personal maximum or zenith possible. And obviously, while you're empowering yourself, use that information or that knowledge or those ideas to empower other people. And I think in life, I think you could have your cake and eat it too. You could empower yourself and you could empower others. Furthermore, you could put yourself very high and also put other people very high too. And I think for all of us to consider, so much of what we believe as ultimate truths are essentially just socialized notions, things our parents have taught us, our teachers have taught us, or authority figures have taught us, pop culture, media, movies have taught us, books have taught us, you know, wisdom, common knowledge, music. And I think it's important, regardless of whatever morals or ethics or values we're raised in society, for us to really just kind of look at these things in the eye and just question it. Because, and this is actually the interesting thing too, is that, you know, for myself, I decided to be a Catholic, not because I got strong-armed into going so. Is I made a decision for myself. Okay, you know, a lot of things about the Catholic Church I don't like or agree with, but all things considered, I still like this religion and I'm going to practice willingly. And I think anything in life should always be a choice, not an obligation. Like even in the future when you have kids, me and Cindy, I'm not 100% sure about this, but obviously in the long run, like if my kids don't want to go to church or my kids don't want to do something, I'm not going to force them. It's going to be a choice. And it's kind of tough for us as parents because we want to exert ultimate control over our children because we think we know what's best for them and we want them to leave a positive legacy and not to squander their lives. But that's also a little bit insulting to your children because, in fact, your children might be smarter than you and they actually might know better than you. There's a nice saying is that like, treat your parents how you would like your children to treat you. I'm kind of getting a little bit off track, but realize in life, this is also a good ethical thing, I think, is when you're interacting with anybody, whether it be your kids, your partner, your family members, friends, whatever, whenever you ask somebody something, maybe just a disclaimer. It's like, oh, no pressure. Obviously, you could say no. Would you like to do this with me, or would you like to do this for me? And always give them the choice. Don't be in like obligation, like, oh, if you're a real friend, you would do this for me. When people say that, they're actually not a real friend. And also, when you're asking anybody for anything, be okay with people saying no. And also, in your mind, expect them to say no, or at least know that it's a possibility of them saying no. And if they say no, don't resent them for it. And I think that's a sign of, because you don't want to just become a tyrant over them. I mean, true friendship isn't just forcing people to do things against their will. It's also taking their preferences in mind. So anyways, this video is all over the place. I'm just going to recap some points that I find interesting. First and foremost, the most important thing in any social relationship is not to resent the other person. The best way to not resent the person is to not compromise your own personal morals and ethics and not to do things or say things just to please the other person. In spite that might put a band-aid in the short term, long term it's going to be disastrous. Second point is don't put others above yourself because that actually kind of makes no sense. Also could lead to resentment and also kind of is abnegation for yourself, or it makes you smaller. And if in fact you should try to become stronger and try to seek others to become stronger too. Third point, realize that whatever religion, philosophy, or lifestyle you decide to follow, it must be a choice, not an obligation. Don't let the fear of like hell or the afterlife or other people in the community ostracizing you strong arm you into doing things that you don't want to do. Whatever you decide to do in your life, be 100% honest with yourself. Is this a choice that I'm legitimately making for myself that's best for me? Or am I just doing it to please somebody else? Also, in life, I think love must involve some sort of sacrifice. So don't think that like you could love somebody else without actually being willing to take some sort of personal downside for it. Because I think true love is about sacrifice. And the last thing is, the simple thing is just don't be petty. I think pettiness is also one of my vices, my personal vices, what I consider a vice. Whenever I see people being petty, acting petty. So obviously you cannot control other people's behavior, but you can control your own behavior. So my personal thing is, even moments where I want to feel petty, I'll just zip my lip, I'll go for a walk, I'll go to the gym, I'll take a cold shower, I'll go to the gym, take a hot sauna, whatever it may be. I'll read a book or listen to some music. Once you say something petty, that pettiness is like a poisonous mosquito constantly stinging. And also like when you are petty to somebody else, you actually make yourself smaller. The word petty actually comes from petite, small. You don't want to be petty. You don't want to be small. Be the bigger person. And whatever you consider petty is just up to you. Generally speaking, I think a good ethical rule to follow is this. Don't treat others the way you would want them to treat you. Meaning, if you don't like when other people act paid to you, don't act paid towards other people. Or like when you're driving on the freeway, if people who cut you off, if that upsets you, don't cut off other people. Or, you're at the gym and people don't re-rack their weights and that pisses you off. You be the one to re-rack the weights. And so essentially life is about being great, about being big, about being magnanimous, which Aristotle, magnanimous, comes from megalosikon, I think, in Greek, which means great-souled, which I kind of like it. So let us be great, let us be bigger, let us avoid pettiness, avoid resentment, and realize that life is the ultimate option. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Peace out.